It really is a great pleasure to be back here in Leeds. Sounds a bit like a rock band or something, but it really is. I had many happy years here at this university and stood here on many occasions before. As Nicola has already explained, this year's conference celebrates the diversity of our sector and the many benefits that this affords. The size and shape of the UK's higher education sector is constantly changing as it adapts to social and economic developments. As a result of this evolution, our sector is made up of a range of institutions that pursue and excel in a variety of missions and specialisms, with different funding sources, modes of delivery, and regulatory and legal frameworks. These institutions are finding innovative and wide-ranging approaches to provide high-quality teaching and learning, efficient research, and strong business engagement to complement the many and varied needs of the complex society in which we live. In an era where student choice is paramount and there is a genuine desire to widen access and raise the educational attainment of society, a diverse sector can often offer courses and a provision to suit all ages, learning styles, financial circumstances and backgrounds. From this diversity comes the sector's real strength. Our universities are both uniquely and collectively placed to act as leaders of change and forces for good, whether this means a transformed life opportunities of students, promoting innovation, creativity, invention through research, or supporting economic growth, or creating jobs and providing other benefits in their local area. We've seen that the increasing diversity of our sector and growing complexity in terms of running our universities demand strong and well-informed leadership. This means that we must strive to increase diversity of our leadership in our universities as well. Universities UK is undertaking work in this area, and this issue will feature in the conference programme later on this week. Over the past 12 months, and with the support of many colleagues in this room as chairs of policy networks and spokespeople, Universities UK has been working hard to promote our strength in diversity to the public, business and politicians. We've been proactively engaging in a purposeful debate on the value of universities to inform decisions about the future of higher education, its role, regulation and funding. And we've seen some notable achievements. The first is highlighting the economic impact of universities. UK has done a lot of analysis in this area, and in April it published its report examining the sector's contribution to local communities and the national economy. The headline figure, of course, is that the sector generated over £73 billion of output in 2011-12. This work has been an important vehicle for communicating the value of universities to media, local and national government, to business and to communities, and is at the heart of our Back Universities campaign in the run-up to the general election. Another significant achievement is that UUK's lobbying succeeded in limiting cuts initially mooted as £1 billion to a more digestible £125 million. In England, this year's much-delayed grant letter typically gave with one hand and took away with the other. The headlines last year predicted severe cuts to teaching and research grants in the order for BIS to plug the £1.4 billion hole in its finances. Cuts on this scale would have been catastrophic for the sector. The final settlement was the work of many discussions with many individuals over many weeks and months. UUK was involved in much of the behind-the-scenes work with BIS, Her Majesty's Treasury and HEFGI to help them recognise the detrimental effect that additional cuts would have on universities, and also to reinforce our case that universities are working hard to deliver efficiency savings and are not, as is often suggested, awash with cash. UUK has also been lobbying on behalf of its members to change the provisions for international students in the immigration bill. We've been working hard to gain public understanding that international students are not permanent immigrants and that they enrich our communities and are vital to the future of our universities as well as the economy. Our report, published 2 weeks ago, clearly shows that 78% of the public support the case for international students being taken out of the immigration regime, and this was echoed recently by Lord Heseltine, of course. This work is ongoing and forms a central theme in our pre-election campaign, which I'll discuss shortly. This is just one example of UUK's efforts to engage with the public. Perhaps the best example, however, is the 2014 Universities Week campaign, which was our biggest and best to date. The university research base, of course, is a vital component of the framework supporting the national economy and our international competitiveness. This year's University Week campaign focused on engaging the public in the ways in which university research is developing solutions to the many challenges we face in today's society. We were delighted that over 100 universities took part from all the regions and nations of the UK. More than 250 events took place, including a special exhibition at the Natural History Museum, which attracted 28,000 people to a week-long showcase of inspiring research. The exhibition received great feedback from the public, and the campaign proved to be a fantastic way to engage and inspire the next generation of university students. UUK has long held the view that increasing the number of graduates is a good thing. The government announced the provision of 30,000 additional student places in England for this academic year and the removal of student number controls entirely for 2015-16. Whilst I recognise that this policy change was not universally welcomed by all of our members, it is worth knowing that it's still a step in the right direction in terms of promoting the need for graduates in the workplace if the UK is to remain internationally competitive. At the same time, however, we need to look carefully at how this will be funded. This is a point that I will come back to later in my speech. Last year, UUK proactively intervened on hearing proposals to amend regulations governing the automatic designation of HEFCE-funded institutions for student support. The proposals from BIS went significantly beyond what was required to provide regulatory reassurances and would have given the Secretary of State direct powers over universities by conditions of access to loan funding. We were able to intervene and propose a sensible alternative. The agreement on institutional designation met government needs for reassurances but protected institutional autonomy. We were encouraged that government accepted our proposal and worked with us to put it in place. In my inaugural speech last year, I talked about the risks inherent in over-regulation of the sector. Whilst we recognise that there is a need for some kind of sector-wide quality control by an independent regulatory authority, as there is in many public-facing industries, institutional autonomy is vital for a successful and respected education sector in the UK. With 240 days until the general election, we need to continue to provide assurance that universities are changing and improving, modernising without the need for a state intervention. We need to take the lead and step up our efforts to communicate the public benefit of our universities and influence those crafting the range of policies which would end up in the party manifestos. We are not intending to publish a lengthy blueprint for the sector. Instead, we're making a clear, concise and compelling argument for why the success of our universities should be a priority for any incoming government and what they need to do to support, protect and enhance our diverse sector. So today I would like to set out what policies an incoming government should prioritise to support the success of our sector. I will focus on three key areas. Research and innovation, and here we need to make the case for closing the gap between the UK's investment in research and innovation and that of its major competitors. Internationalisation and immigration, calling on the government and universities to work together to attract well-qualified international students and staff to the UK. And student funding, highlighting the need to develop sustainable student funding systems in England, but with relevance to the whole of the UK. Turning firstly to research and innovation, evidence shows that around the world, science and research has a higher profile than ever before, as more governments recognise that a strong innovation and science base is vital in order to thrive in today's highly competitive global economy. Publicly funded research not only boosts the prosperity and growth of the economy, but is associated with a higher productive workforce, as well as cultivating new markets and generating new ideas and products. In most disciplines, the UK is first in the G8 in terms of the quality and impact of its research output, and we are extraordinarily efficient and effective at it. When you consider that the UK's public investment is 0.5% of GDP compared to an OECD average of 0.8%, with returns estimated at between 20 and 50% per year. And despite representing just 3.2% of global research and development expenditure, the UK accounts for 11.6% of citations and 15.9% of the world's most highly cited articles. But where we differ to our competitor countries is that a higher proportion of our research and development takes place within our universities. As a result, universities in the UK have been the seeding ground for many of today's greatest life-changing discoveries. In the past 60 years, research conducted in UK universities has contributed to such discoveries as the structure of DNA, semiconductor lasers, fibre optics, plastic electronics, the LCD computer screen, and even the cloning of Dolly the sheep. So what lies behind our success? Our world-class institutions are uniquely placed to attract top talent from across the globe, facilitate multidisciplinary investigation, encourage international collaboration, and drive knowledge transfer through technology clusters and science and enterprise parks. In 2012-13, UK universities engaged in collaborative research to the tune of close to £1 billion. These international collaborations in particular rely on UK institutions having complementary standing to other institutions in the world. If the UK's public investment in research continues to lag behind our competitors, the UK will struggle to remain world-leading research power. We cannot be complacent. We need to act now. That is why we are asking that the new government establishes a 10-year plan to increase public investment in research in real terms, year on year, to sustain our position as a premier global research power. The sector was grateful to ministers for understanding the importance of research funding in the last two spending reviews. The ring-fencing of science funding has provided us with some degree of much-needed cash terms protection in difficult economic times. However, the problem of future underfunding in research cannot be offset purely by further efficiency gains or selectivity. We believe that the continuation of the ring fence for science is necessary beyond 2016, but with a real terms increase in funding. We are also asking that the dual support system, that is the complementary funding streams of a block grant and a discipline-specific grant funding, is maintained. This will give our universities the freedom and flexibility needed to drive innovation, invest in new and emerging areas, and respond to changing needs. And we need to increase in support for higher education innovation funding as well. It's a mechanism that's been so successful in our knowledge transfer, working with small and medium enterprises and supporting local economic growth. The need for universities and government to work together to attract suitably qualified international students and staff to work in the UK is the second area we are focusing on for an incoming government. Here in the UK, our higher education system is a huge export sector worth over £10 billion a year, with considerable potential to grow over the coming decades. We have the institutions, the reputation, and the innovation to attract the best students, researchers, and lecturers from overseas. For teaching and research, the UK education sector is second in the world. It is not surprising, therefore, that we are the second most popular destination for international students. In 2012-13, almost 300,000 people came from outside the European Union to study at our universities. No other country, apart from the United States, can match our appeal. This is good news for Britain. International students inject a huge amount into our universities and the local economies around them, totalling around £7 billion a year, as well as underpinning to both the cultural environment and finances within our institutions. UK degrees are recognised worldwide, and right now we are educating students from some of the strongest growing economies in the world, including India, China, Brazil, and Nigeria. Today's international students are tomorrow's business leaders and politicians, and where they study influences where they will return to explore the potential for future engagement and collaboration. Recently, however, this positive societal and economic contribution has been overshadowed by the changes to the student visa and immigration regime, creating a strong adverse perception in many countries. And after a period of strong growth, the decline in numbers of international students from some parts of the world is a serious concern. We need a change in government immigration policy to realise the fantastic opportunity this country has in continuing to attract the brightest and the best international students and staff to our shores. Over the last year, Universities UK has been making the case for the removal of international students from any net migration target. Their inclusion in this target sends out an unwelcoming message to the potential students across the world who are considering coming to the UK to study. It also creates an unwelcome incentive to reduce international students for a government under pressure to bring overall migration numbers down. Our joint report with British Future on international students and UK immigration, published last month, has shown that the public misconceptions about international students are changing. They welcome the income that they bring to towns and cities and applaud the fact that those who have gained skills in our universities use them to help British firms, rather than taking those skills away to work for international competitors. Only 22% of those we polled thought of international students as immigrants, an overwhelming 78% saw them as temporary and welcome visitors to these shores. More than half, 59%, thought the government should not reduce international student numbers, even if it limits the government's ability to cut immigration overall. And 3/4 of those we asked thought international students should be allowed to stay for work for a period after they graduate. There is more we can do as a sector and as a country to attract the best. This means sending out a welcoming and consistent message to international students and staff, and enhancing the opportunities for qualified students to stay for a period after graduation to gain work experience in the UK. We believe that we need an ambitious government-backed strategy for growth, with investment to support the sector's international marketing and development of international partnerships and strategies to increase the mobility of UK students. This should include increased support for UUK's international unit. In addition, the higher education sector remains committed to tackling any abuse of the immigration system. Significant investment has been made by the sector to fulfil sponsor requirements. Last year, the Higher Education Better Regulation Group estimated that the sector spent £67 million on Tier 4 compliance in 2012-13, and the co-regulation initiative remains a priority for Universities UK. There is no doubt that all of us here today are supportive of the Home Office attempts to eliminate abuse, but we believe that the efforts should be made to identify a solution that addresses identified non-compliance, whilst ensuring that genuine students can experience a more welcoming approach to visa monitoring, and that they and the wider sector are not caught in the crossfire. We will continue to strive for this and make this a key issue for an incoming government, along with a more favourable post-study work opportunities. The third and final key area which we believe should be a priority for an incoming government is the student funding system. We're seeking cross-party consensus for a long-term and sustainable system of funding that will provide stability for the sector, drive social mobility, and produce the skilled graduates that the economy needs. Research has estimated that around 20% of GDP growth in the UK between 1982 and 2005 was due to increased graduate skills in the population. Yet the UK still ranks only 7th amongst OECD and G20 members for the proportion of our population with a tertiary level education. I won't go over the arguments you'll have heard many times before about the lower unemployment and higher earning potential of graduates, nor the positive societal impacts for a more highly educated population. These are aspirations which we want all young people in this country to aspire to, but many still worry if they can afford to go to university. Neither students nor universities benefit from a funding system being overhauled every few years. The stability needed by universities and students will only be achieved if the system is properly funded. That means both public and private costs of higher education being affordable and the system attracting political consensus. Universities UK has established a student funding panel to assess the current system in England and to make recommendations on its future development. Members include Will Hutton of the Independent Commission on Fees and Paul Johnson of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. This panel will report to the UK in spring 2015, and we will highlight any emerging findings from the group over the coming months as this issue becomes, no doubt, a hot topic in the election. In all of this discussion, we must not lose sight of the important issue of social mobility. It is important that suitably qualified students can access higher education regardless of financial circumstances. We will keep this front and centre in our discussions over the coming months. Universities are this nation's success story. Our higher education system that meets a broad, diverse range of needs will help ensure the UK maintains its global competitiveness in the face of ever-increasing competition. We are all very aware of the immense significance of the Scottish independence referendum. UUK has worked closely with Universities Scotland to address a clearly very emotive issue. UUK will work with all the members in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England to discuss the implication of the referendum decision once the outcome is known. We are a sector which is focused on finding solutions, meeting challenges and working in partnership. In the aftermath of next year's election, my message to the policymakers and the Westminster class of 2015 is this: what we are asking for is modest for a sector which contributes billions to the economy, creates thousands of jobs and keeps Britain at the forefront of the global race. Thank you very much.